the energy right now is intense. So even if you haven't gone through something that is life-changing as beings, we are all feeling it. And so I think just having some compassion, even if your life appears today like it was yesterday, if you stick your head up at all, there is an energy that is quite unprecedented.
Welcome to the Spirits Beside Us podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lippincott. I'm an ex-Wall Street analyst turned international medium, spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. Each week we'll dive into the fascinating and uplifting arena of the non-physical world to help you deepen your understanding and spiritual connection to the unseen realm. We'll also share a behind-the-scenes look with others who've done the same and speak with experts in the field about their experiences. Pull up a seat and let's dive into these perspective-changing conversations. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spirits Beside Us. I'm so happy to have you here with us. And today we're going to be looking at not only our minds, but also how we help and heal ourselves, because I've been finding so many times that self-healing and self-help and really self-care is something being such a big thing. And how do we all do about that? And one of the things that I love to see is that there are now a couple of specialists out there, and one of them is our guest, who helps us understand, how do we kind of go into that space of creativity? How do we go into that space of resilience through working with whether it's drawings or journaling or artistry, because there's so many ways that we can help our minds just really work with it. So I want to introduce Susan Hensley. She's a transformational coach, speaker, and author, and she's dedicated to helping people navigate all the trials and tribulations and the transitions that we all go through using joy, creativity, and resilience. She's got decades of experience. She is a former corporate executive and leadership coach, but she's got a very deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities that come with the life's changes we all undergo. So with that, I want to introduce you. And Susan, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, it's an honor to have you here. One of the things I wanted to just jump right into is that, especially in the current world environment, shall we say, it seems like life is just getting so either chaotic or ups and downs, or you're starting to sometimes feel like energy just suddenly saps you. You're like, oh my gosh, I've lost my energy. What do I do? Or I've lost my mojo, or whatever. And then people find themselves lost, or something happens to them, like maybe they've lost their job, or their company is slashing, something as a result of the economy or something. And they find themselves in a major life transition. What would you say to those people who are undergoing those major life transitions? It seems like they look and they say, oh no, there's no tomorrow. I mean, is it, I don't want to say easy, but are there kind of remedies for them? Are there ways that they can focus to try to help themselves, give themselves self-care? Is it more like they've got to realize that they can focus on the here and the now as opposed to, what's about to happen? But big question.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge question. And I love where you start, because the energy right now is intense. So even if you haven't gone through something that is life-changing as beings, we are all feeling it. And so I think just having some compassion and self-care versus like the why am I feeling this way, just recognizing that even if your life appears today like it was yesterday, if you stick your head up at all, there is an energy that is quite unprecedented right now, for depending on your age, right? You may not if you're 80, 90, you've gone through a lot more, but depending on your age, you may never have experienced what I call world energy at this level. So I think acknowledging that. The people who are in the major life transitions that you described, and as we are recording this, there are lots of big changes going on with people in their jobs. I think the first thing is it's okay to grieve, right? We all crave, I mean, the great illusions, we crave permanence and everything is impermanent, right? Each day we're on this earth, our bodies change and we get that much closer to death, right? I mean, it sounds morbid, but there's a lot of truth in that statement. And it's very hard, unless we're in the moment of deepest meditative prayer and connection to, in our human world, to feel good about that, right? We want things to be good, to be happy. And I think that's part of the experience here. So if a listener has gone through something truly tumultuous, the steps for coaching during a transformation is honoring an ending. And that is not by saying, I'm just moving forward. There are all sorts of steps because half of endings happen to us and half we may want, right? And you described endings that are happening to people. And it really is interesting that the data and scientific studies show it's about 50-50 if you think of all the endings that we go through in life. Some endings can be happy, but first honoring the ending, whatever that looks like for you, but just giving yourself some time to process whatever that is before moving into that transition state, which is what's next. And what's hard is we want that as humans to be straight and easy. And the more we grasp at it being straight and easy, the harder it is. So, I mean, this is where that whole need for deep self-compassion is. And as much as I think it's important to reframe and have a generally hopeful outlook, not overly optimistic, right? There's a sort of a difference between like blind optimism and yet hoping and laying the groundwork, accepting that a big life change has a lot of steps sideways, steps back, steps forward, and there's a patience. So it's honoring the ending. It's having a lot of patience for the sidewaysness of that messy middle.
Mm.
And even when that new beginning comes, all the excitement of a new beginning, recognizing it comes with challenge, right? And I mean, we can think of new beginnings just like a new job. Like we can be really excited to take a new job, and a new job could have a very steep learning curve, can be very tricky. And the first months can be stressful. Same with first months in a relationship. First months as a new parent, you may have desperately wanted this child and
Surprise. You got more than you bargained for.
And so I think it's keeping in mind and having compassion for these steps. And they're not even as linear as I said, right? There's a need to honor endings. There's this big messy middle and there's new beginnings, but you may think you're already ready to be in the new beginning and you still may have some grieving about what was lost, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the old saying, where God closes a door, he opens a window. Yeah. That kind of concept is like, it's not necessarily like one thing is closed and everything is now closed. It's, you also now have a new beginning somewhere. You have a new opportunity. So to your point, it's, while you don't have to be, looking through the world with rose-colored glasses and total, optimism, you do have to look at it through the lens of possibility. What's possible now?
Right. So, there's a quote, I think it's attributable to Coach named Donald Miller, but what does this make possible now? And you just referenced it, right? And there's really important points to ask that question. In the initial shock, that question does not feel good. And I think that's what people need a little bit of time to heal and process. Because if you are going through a bunch of really raw emotions, to immediately say, what does this make possible? You're not in that headspace. And to honor and actually put some ritual, burn a piece of paper or whatever, right? I mean, there's rituals. You can bury a symbol of actually giving that part of your life and who you're going to be a closing to help you see what that no longer being there makes possible.
Yeah.
So I love the question, and it's really critical to have growth so we don't stagnate, right? We're always wanting growth, even in uncertain times. It's the impulse is towards growth. It is important to honor what has changed.
Yeah, that's so true, and that goes right back to the concept of self-care while you're still, grieving, while you're still having those emotions that are so human to all of us. But it was interesting that because I sit weekly with a mentor who brings through his spirit guide, and his spirit guide was teaching. He teaches us every weekend. I'm sorry, every week. And, I've been going through them for about, a year now. And this one specific time, not so long ago, a couple of weeks ago, the spirit guide started talking all about self-care. He said something along the lines of, it is of utmost importance to maintain your self-care. And we're all scribbling it down. Oh my gosh, this sounds great. What is he going to say? And he got so basic. And it was so obvious. And as I look back on it, I'm like, that just makes so much sense, but it's something that we don't do. And he started listing off, go walk in nature, go sit in meditation, visualize happiness, do breath work, all these basic things that we just, and write down gratitude, things that we are not even thinking about, like we're grateful for that morning cup of coffee, or we're grateful for this beautiful sunset, or grateful for the food, or we're grateful for, a roof over our head, things that, in fact, people in this world don't have. But we ignore them completely. And he's like going on talking about all these basic things. I'm like, wow, talking about going back to 101 fundamentals here. And that's what he was talking about. And at the time, I didn't understand why he was saying this. I guess he knew, because it was within a matter of days of him actually saying that I went through this period of negativity, difficulty, frustrations, angst. And I was like, ah! And all of a sudden, there are his words written out. I'm like, all right, let me try this. And I did it. And lo and behold, I'm like, oh, wow, he's right. I'm always second guessing spirit, but I shouldn't. But it goes right to your point. We got to honor the emotions, but as we honor those emotions, let's do something with them. Let's give ourselves that self-care that we need.
Yeah. The basics self-care, I think, are that foundation. And in times of such intense change, and it's particularly with the change, you can't see where it's going, right? There's a flip-floppy quality to the change, or a chaotic sense. Like, something's changing, but you just don't know where it's ending up. Those basics, as you were going through them, are so grounding. It's like the foundation of our houses, right? Nature, meditation, sleep, and the gratitudes that are not, the all my dreams come true, but the, electricity that, right, whatever it is, refrigeration, heat, yes, wherever your climate, to exist in a climate control thing, it can feel funny if you do it every day in a rote manner, but when you really get down to what it means, if this sounds funny, I have had in the past, we had a dryer stop working. It sounds so silly. And, I live in a sunny place. It wasn't like it was beyond me to figure out how to get these, but of course, when towels were in the washing machine, and the chaos I felt with a load of wet towels. I mean, it's such a strange.
It's a first world problem.
It is such a ridiculously first world problem. And yet the joy of getting that dryer fixed, and not like rigging a clothesline and worrying about like the dust and leaves. And I mean, it was such a silly thing, but I had not thought of putting like even just the modern conveniences, right? We joked about air and heat just now, but yeah, if you have easy access to a washer or a dryer, right? It's sort of a fun exercise in gratitude to find what I call different creature comforts
Yeah. Yeah.
each day, whether they're in your bathroom, your kitchen, your car, right? Whatever those may be, to really spend some time. And it doesn't have to be long, right? You can list some pretty intense creature comforts in about 2 minutes if you look around where you're even listening to this.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's so important. Is that even if you were to start taking a practice of gratitude, don't make it more than 3 items. You can do it in your head.
Right.
You can do it in your head. Make it a game, and every day say, okay, well, today I'm grateful for this little tiny thing that I never pay attention to, and
Yeah,
I'm also grateful for this other little tiny thing that I completely ignore all the time in my life.
exactly.
What would happen? The other way you can look at it is, okay, what would happen if I went without X? Fill in the blank. Something that, like your point, like what happens if I go without electricity for a week? I mean, I've been there. When Hurricane, what was it? The one that came up the northeastern coast here.
Is that Sandy or?
Sandy, yeah. When Sandy came out, we were without electricity for a week, and
Yeah,
it was cold, and we didn't have anything. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I now am in a third world country." I
right.
suddenly realized what it's like not to have electricity for a long time. It's little things like that, and you're like, "Oh my god!" When it came back on, we were celebrating like it was, January 1st.
Yeah. No, it really is amazing what it's like and the stages we go through, right? To your point, when the electricity goes out or something happens, like the shock, the frustration, and then you start to get creative. And I think even recognizing that sometimes the level of creativity we get in honoring ourselves, like it is a shock, it is upsetting, and we are grateful. And we start to adjust. That's that resilience. And I think we can really overlook it in our creature comforts, if you will, that although we're going to go through like shock, anger, rejection, all of the issues, as it goes on, we do adjust and adapt and start to make those changes. And it's also worth having some appreciation. I think if anyone's feeling fear about the different things that are going on, it's interesting to look back at times in your life when you've really adapted to what you thought was either unacceptable or would be a disaster. And you can see that resilience and how you've moved on. That's worth spending some time in gratitude on as well, because it's a muscle and it's good for us to remember what we have gone through before. Because as we've moved on, it's very easy to dismiss it or to think, oh, well, X, Y, or Z, and not to really honor your strength and resilience. And I think some time spent in gratitude or memory of that makes us stronger and faster, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
really is like
exactly.
training a muscle,
It is.
stronger and faster the next time we need resilience.
Yeah. And another thing, and I think you might have touched on this previously, was just letting your ideas flow, whether it's with journaling or talking to somebody else. But I find that journaling for so many people is so, I don't want to say healing, but what's the word? Cathartic.
Cathartic. Yeah.
It gets your feelings out, your emotions out. You're actually able to sort of verbalize it. And many times I find that you'll start writing things that perhaps you weren't even realizing you were feeling, and that comes out. I
Well,
mean, what do you think about journaling?
so huge fan of journaling, right? Both written journaling and art journaling, right? I've written a whole book about that because when we stay in our heads, I mean, what you've described is when we just allow the thoughts to loop in our heads, which is normal and human. I want to be really careful here. We all do it. I wrote a blog the other day. It's like, what did you just say? And it was about talking in your own head. It's like these outrageous things are just going through our head where if someone else actually just standing next to us said it, you'd be like, what? When you journal, one, it diminishes that voice. Two, it gives it a safe space to live. And the minute it has a space, it sort of dissipates, I've noticed. And as people work through, rather with words, with crayons, with art, with images, wherever you're processing, once it's contained on that page, one, it diminishes in size immediately. It's just contained on a page. And I think that's a really interesting exercise because when it's just looping in our heads, it feels big and controlling. When you can write it, you'll find, and you said this, how quickly you start to move on and into a different vein because it almost needed the space to run. It was like a thought that needed to be poured out, but instead of, poured into something destructive, right? Perhaps conflict with a member of your family or coworker, you put it into a page and somehow, which just creates a safe spot. And very quickly it allows you to see, it's just what you're feeling at the moment, right? You're not that feeling.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
nothing actually happens when you capture that feeling.
Well, you touched on something that's so critical, and just within spirituality, we understand that we are not our thoughts.
Right.
We are more the observer of our thoughts. And so many people get into that place of, I am the thought, I am the pain, I am the body. We're not our thoughts. We're not our emotions. We're not our pain. We're not our body. We are literally the spirit, the observer looking at all these things. So when our thoughts are going, we suddenly, we're I guess, preconditioned to think, those are my thoughts. That's me. That's my world. No, it's not your world. I put it out on a piece of paper and you'll find out, guess what? Oh, I am the observer.
Yeah. And that's what's so great is about journaling, right? Written journal, art journal is it illustrates in a physical sense that you are the observer. That one, the thought is coming from you. You're also the creator. Nothing stuck that in your head, right? You bought into some image or else, but then you are the observer. And like I said, I love the actual turning of a page, right? Look at the choice and free will, if you will, if you've just journaled all this of turning a page to a clean page.
Wow.
So symbolic.
Yeah, that exactly. It's so symbolic. You could have all these unhappy, negative emotions and you get them out of your head. Number one, you see that you are the observer because you're observing all the emotions. All of a sudden you've stepped out of it, or it stepped out of you. And then two, you close the page and move on. And you're like, oh, okay. I don't have to deal with this anymore. It helps you move on. Maybe you still feel that way, but it's so much less.
Yeah. Well, it's so much less. And I'm going to harp for a moment on the resilience thing. If you flip back the next time you feel it, it's a little less scary. It's a little less overwhelming because you remember you felt it before. You worked through it in a constructive manner. You turn the page. So I think that in the act of doing something with these very uncomfortable feelings and thoughts, it gets us on a faster loop of recognizing what's happening, right? Because that's all it is. You're never going to keep the thoughts at bay. That's not healthy. That's not the purpose. But it's that waking up, that pace with which you can bring yourself out of it that I think finding a really constructive tool, whatever works for you, right? And there's a bunch of different modalities and tools to get that. And I use the snap on the fingers to get that quicker, that pace quicker. So your suffering ends sooner.
Yeah, because you're not obsessing over it. And I think that's kind of the other problem is that it's almost like a 4X loop in your head where it just keeps on cycling in your head, going around and around and around like a mouse on a treadmill or a wheel, as opposed to getting it out of your head. It's no longer spinning in your head anymore. It's no longer like that dryer you were talking about when this one's plugged in.
Yeah. No, but that's a perfect, that endless loop. If we don't do something with that energy, we can get caught in it. And the longer we stayed in it, right? I mean, this gets into brain science, but I believe it's also quite spiritual. We can get ruts, right, in our brain, neuroplasticity. And we want to increase that neuroplasticity and getting those thoughts out or process, getting that energy out of your body. When you started this, you were talking about spirit guide and getting back to the basics of self-care. Out in nature, a walk, breathing, meditation. So many things help us just move things through our bodies, right? Although we're not our bodies, we have to move this energy through these bodies. It's really important.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, there's even, a walking meditation. What is a walking meditation? You're just literally walking and you're moving, you're
Yeah.
exercising, you're moving, and it takes your mind off of whatever was going on. You're literally taking yourself and your energy and your mind somewhere else. You're moving along. So that just kind of processes everything moving forward.
Exactly.
That's great. And to your point, I guess, you can use words, you can use art, you can use whatever it is that is coming out for you. So if it's art, just draw it or just get it out. Or, I think it's probably good for each person to use whatever it is that comes naturally to them.
Yeah, I think we need to use what we're drawn to. And then sometimes things can get stale or rote. So it's almost paying attention to, we talked about gratitude journaling at the beginning and just 3 things. But like when those couple things become rote, look to give yourself a little change,
Yeah.
if you will, in the routine. And it doesn't mean you do that forever. But once again, I think it helps on presence, right? I think it helps bring us back to the current. One of a favorite walking meditation sometimes of mine is I will choose a color to look for, not necessarily an easy color, like green if you're in a place where the trees are green or shades. But, sometimes it's really interesting. You can choose like an unusual color. And the minute you are aware of that, it can be really surprising what you find as you are walking that's of one of those colors.
Yeah. It's very much of an awareness. It's when you start focusing on it, all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere. It's like,
Exactly.
it's like saying, okay, well, I just bought, a new blue car. All of a sudden you start seeing that same car
Oh.
everywhere, whereas before you never saw it.
Yeah. No, it's all about awareness and expectations and
Yeah.
what we are looking for, because there's so much coming in that as you focus your attention, which is what's so interesting when a day starts off badly and we tell ourselves a story of, oh, it's going to be a tricky day. That is some of the self-talk that needs to be caught immediately. And it's like, I'm going to look for kindnesses today. I'm going to look right where you actually need to set your expectation. And, rather you ask Spirit ever to instead show me signs of light or, whatever phrasing works. Because yes, if you are looking for a bad day,
You're going to find
you
it.
will find it. Yes.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. It's like, first be kind to yourself. You can't be kind to other people unless you're being kind to yourself. It's like, when the flight attendant before takeoff, they said, in case of an oxygen emergency and an oxygen mask will come down, but first put it over your own face and then put it over the other person. You can't give the other person oxygen if you don't have any.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's interesting. I go to a lot of Buddhist meditation classes where I live. I've got a really neat center right by me. And the first one I went to when I moved here was about world peace. So I thought we're meditating on world peace. It's like, no, peace starts within. There is no world peace unless we are peaceful. And that has so stuck with me because, I went and, the world needs peace and I'm going to meditate and pray for peace, all which are great. But you recognize in that practice that if I am peaceful, I am going to ripple out peace and all of that. And it's the oxygen mask, it's the self-talk, it's the expectation. And I think one of the things that is particularly tricky about the time and why so many spirit guides are saying what yours did or your mentors did about self-care is I think with I'm just going to call it chaotic energy that we are experiencing, that each individual, the more settled each of us can be and grounded and present, it helps us collectively to manage through this change we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a change. In fact, we've been hearing for so long that there is a large change coming. And I'm wondering, is this the tip of the iceberg? Are we the Titanic heading right for the iceberg right now? And it's all going on this change.
Yeah. I was listening to someone. It's like, yes, we were born for this time as much as I think at any given day, we may be quaking in our boots. Particular, that particular phrase of, I know the change or the rise in consciousness
Yeah.
that I feel drawn to. I mean, right. Look at the name of the podcast and your work, your life's journey, your story. That yes, it feels hard to believe we're not at some sort of forefront of that.
Yeah, it just keeps on getting more and more, I don't want to say unusual, but the changes, they are coming.
Yeah.
It definitely is interesting. Well, what was it I mean, we've been talking about journaling before. I mean, what was it that kind of got you on your journaling? How did you discover journaling? Was it something kind of like this where you explored sort of a crisis or something had changed? What was it that got you on your journey?
So I've been a lifelong journaler. I had a first career as a journalist. So always been a writer. What really ended up being an interested, spiritual seeker along with leading a pretty straightforward series of careers. What really was an interesting trigger is when I went to just a weekend art workshop and started playing with paint and color because I recognized as much as I believed in morning pages and like waking up and journaling and meditating, had some really good practices. There was a little bit of a staleness and a little bit of hanging on for me into too much of the left brain, like day, location. This is what's gone well. This is what hasn't. Playing with crayons, color, image, and collage ended up having so much symbolism, and you didn't need to find words for everything you were feeling. I would scribble, still do, use emojis, use the things that I loved as a child, which silences the inner critic. Like if you use the art supplies you loved as a 5-year-old before that inner critic really came about, before any teacher, anyone told you weren't a fantastic artist, when you were just playing and creating for the sake of it. What I loved is so instantly, no inner critic, color has so much symbolism, both to us individually and then even societally, that it almost gives voice to things that are very difficult to explain. We've been grasping for words to talk about what we're feeling in the world, right? We're using energy, we're using chaos, you can use colors that get that symbolism. It gets the feeling across without actually, because I think sometimes words fail us. As much as I love words, there is something about color and art that I think, from mankind's start, that we more intuitively understand. So it's not about, creating a piece of art to show anyone, similar to your journal. You're not showing anyone. You're not trying to write perfect prose. You are processing.
Yeah.
And because it's fun and playful, it's a great place to hold fear, if you will, and difficult emotions, because you can draw like scared little things, raging little things, but in that child way, it allows you to then comfort, right? You being the observer can comfort without this many steps. I'm giving a lot of steps in my description, but it's happening much more viscerally.
Yeah. That's great, man. I think you hit the nail on the head, because we'll have these inner feelings, these inner emotions that we may not necessarily be able to label or describe adequately with words, yet you can put it down on a piece of paper in an image of some kind. And as the phrase goes, picture has 1,000 words.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, it is so true. And you feel that because you're going to use, like I said, no matter what you're drawing, you are using and choosing symbols and shapes that either give you comfort, that are expressing, but you don't need to have defined them.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to go at this saying, when I draw a star, this is what I think. I just have a sense of what that is.
And the other thing, it's your representation, it's your image, not somebody else's definition of what the image should be. It's how you see it, how you feel it, and how you want to represent it. It's like every artist in the world. Does every artist paint a tree the same way? No. Every tree is just a little bit different.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, it was funny because when I wrote the book, I put images from my own art journal, which I never thought I would do, but I wanted to show the low bar, that this isn't about creating art, and in the book explained it all.
You don't have to be a Picasso.
No, but that's why I put my own images. And at first I got really afraid because there were several images of fear and shame. And, I was processing. And so I sent it to a few trusted friends. It's like, gosh, am I going to expose myself? People look at it. It's like, I know what I was feeling. So someone else may be looking at this little screaming face or this dervish, and they may think, whatever. It's so interesting how exposed, right? Because I know and I remember, but to anyone else, it just illustrates what my point was. That, but there was a real interesting come to truth moment when I made that decision, and it was a good learning for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so that I think that goes just to the whole concept of what we were talking about earlier, the journaling, getting the words and the ideas out. But if you can do that even more so, literally getting your feelings out through an image, through color, through that literally makes it three-dimensional.
It does. It's a somatic experience. It's symbolic. It's been an interesting way, if you will, to channel. I will almost use that word. I don't use that intentionally. I mean, I'll actually do pages where I'll ask, soul or something like what it wants me to know, and try and do some of my own connection. It's so interesting when I flip back through what at the time I interpreted one way. I was sharing this with you. And a couple months later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I completely knew that was coming, but on a subconscious or psychic or spiritual, right? Whatever realm, I'm not an expert, but some other realm, I actually was doing this in a non-conscious way. It's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, and that's the great thing. That's one thing I'm always trying to tell people is that we all have the ability to the non-physical abilities lying dormant in our head. All we got to do is just turn them on.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And to your point, you were using them. You weren't even really cognizantly using them, but you go back over and all of a sudden you realize that onion has a whole bunch of layers that you can start to peel, and that starts to mean a whole bunch of different things. And you go, oh my gosh, it actually does mean this thing that I'm now realizing. Holy smokes. Isn't spirit amazing?
It is. I would say the thing that is driven, it's interesting, driven such awe in me is how amazing spirit is and how it works through, mysterious ways, to use another cliche. But yes, mysterious ways, with crayons, with playing, in all these directions. Like if a person ever asks for a sign, like you want your sign to come in a certain way.
It'll never come in that specific way. No.
I mean, and it makes me always laugh with the compassion and sometimes a little annoyance at myself. But it's like I've lived long enough to know the sign is not coming that way, and to be open and just trying to recognize it's going to come in the way that's best for me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the funny thing is I can remember I used to walk around saying, okay, spirit, if you're really here, Mr. Spirit Guide, I want to see a pink elephant. And if I don't get that pink elephant, I know it's my mind. You're not really there. And did I see a pink elephant? Of course not. I saw a whole bunch of other things. Did I pay attention to them? No, because I was looking for the damn pink elephant.
Yeah. Once again, going back to, it's about attachment. Expectations are rigid ways of thinking, which I think we're in times where rigid ways of thinking aren't serving us.
No, they're not.
Isn't that an understatement?
Yeah, that's funny. But you were talking about how you started realizing some of these images were coming out, and you weren't even realizing just what they fully meant. But it turns out that perhaps spirit really was working through you, channeling through you, if without even realizing it. And that's one thing that I'm always telling people is that you can start to write, you can start to journal, and maybe do it right after you come out of a meditation. Maybe you set an intention, just gently write whatever it is that starts flowing out of your mind. And you'll start to notice that over time, what you're writing becomes less and less you and more of somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing. You're like, wait a second, that's not my tone of voice. Those aren't the words I normally use. Who's writing this? Guess what? That's spirit.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? There's a writing exercise I love. Well, there's like the concept of morning pages where you just get up and dump for 3 pages. There's also like a timer where I'm going to do something for 10 minutes. I don't need to do it well. You actually can say I can do it badly and see what emerges with the expectation by taking any expectation of quality off.
Yeah.
Right. It's very, very freeing for people in, industrialized societies to take the expectation of performance off, because I think that does allow spirit to come through so much more quickly.
Yeah. Because because when you take the expectation away and you take away the rigidity that we were just talking about, all of a sudden it allows the creativity to flow. You're actually then working in your right brain. And that's where spirit connects. Spirit does not connect in our left, logical, analytical mind. It connects with our creative mind. That's why that's why all children are always connected to spirit. That's the way it is.
That is exactly why it is that right brain, which is so holistic and connected and intuitive, that it isn't till, later that we sort of shut that down and move over.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is great. When we could talk about this all day long, wish we could. But if you were to give advice to one listener who was like coming to you and saying, "What do I do? I'm stuck." What would you say to that listener?
So I think I would start with, are you ready for growth? If you're stuck, sometimes we want to stay stuck a little longer. And I think nothing is more shocking than trying to force ourselves to growth before we're ready. So I really start with, if you are ready to do the work of growth, if you need to stay stuck a little longer, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you just need to rest. Maybe you are exhausted. So I try and do some real discussion with, it is okay to be stuck sometimes. And because you may just need rest and healing, like when an animal gets hurt. And I want to honor that. If the person feels like, when you ask them that question, I think in our bodies, we know they're ready for growth. And there's a whole series of things I think we do, but I want to be really careful that we don't badger people. And it has to do with our society into moving before they are ready, because you just stuff all those emotions and it comes back on you. So I might say it might be time to you may not be stuck. You just may need some rest.
Yeah, rest. Exactly. And going back to that whole concept of self-healing, just allow yourself to heal and focus on you. That's not a selfish thing. That's actually a beneficial thing. Going back to the ripple effect we were talking about, the more healing you give yourself, the higher vibration you'll become, and that higher vibration will rub off on other people, and you'll make other people a higher vibration.
Yeah. Healing happens in a series of stages. We want it to be like getting over a cold where you're better. But you think that colds can have like a darn cough can linger, to a point of great annoyance. And I think sometimes we need to honor that when we're in a big time of change and transition too.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. This was so helpful, and I think Susan, that you certainly inspired a lot of people. So, Susan, where can people get in contact with you to learn more?
Oh, sure. Easiest way to find me is just the website, and that's susan-hensley.com. So easy place. All the information's there. I answer any questions that come in through the contact me, and so that's easiest.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Thank you, everybody, again for today, for listening in. Hope you got a little tidbit of wisdom from either Spirit or Susan, who is tremendous wisdom as it is. And I hope that this is something that is helping you. And if you're liking what you're hearing, by all means, like, subscribe. That way, you'll always get the information in your feed every Wednesday. You'll never miss an episode. And always just reach out to us at montclairmedium.com. That way, you'll be able to see what's going on next. So with that, this is Chris signing off, sending you love and light, and we will see you next time. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spirits Beside Us. Make sure you head over to the show notes for all the links and information on this week's episode. You can check it out at spiritsbesideus.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, head over to rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're looking for a community of spiritual seekers like yourself, make sure you join my Facebook page, Spirits Beside Us Podcast on Facebook. This is Chris signing off, sending you love and light. I can't wait to connect with you again on Wednesday.